Hello and welcome to another edition of GuideVision Insider, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes not only here at GuideVision, but into the wider world of ServiceNow. And for today's episode, we're going to be talking about employee experience with a couple of people directly from ServiceNow. They're obviously not with me here in our podcast studio here at GuideVision, but we're with them via Zoom. And our guests today are Mats Nemelka and Martin Kraus. And welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Douglas.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot for this. One of the things that I try to do in this podcast is to try to explain a little bit about some of the underlying reasons for using ServiceNow and for why things are done the way that they're done. And it's really wonderful to have both of you because if I understand correctly, your background or where you work is in this field of employee experience, which is becoming a much more important part of what ServiceNow does. So, Mats, what do you do? What do you do at ServiceNow?
Great question. So basically, more or less, the title is to be an employee experience solution specialist. And that's what I've been doing for almost 5 years now here at ServiceNow. But I've been in this HCM cloud space for a couple of more years. So looking at more or less 10 years of HCM cloud experience. And besides that, I like the mountains. I'm based in Switzerland, so you have to like the mountains. So I like ski touring, hiking, and these kind of things. That's what I usually do, besides, employee experience.
Excellent, excellent. And Martin Kraus, you're also joining us today from Switzerland. What do you do at ServiceNow?
Yeah, almost Switzerland, south of Germany.
Okay.
So yes, I'm leading the solution consulting team for employee experience at ServiceNow for Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and Eastern Europe, which we call Central Region. Mm-hmm. I've been here for 1.5 years at ServiceNow. And before that, I also worked in the HR tech space, HR cloud space. I spent time at Workday and I spent time at SAP. So summarizing my experience, professional experience for around 15 years. But I will talk a little bit around that later on. Yeah, in my free time, I have 2 small kids with 1 and 5 years. So I'm pretty busy with, playing with them and having a great time with them.
And I'm really glad that my kids are a little bit older, but they're a lot of fun at that age, definitely. So today we're talking about employee experience, and this is a phrase that seems to be coming up more and more. I haven't really encountered it much until really starting to work with GuideVision and with ServiceNow. But what is employee experience, and why has its importance grown in recent years? Maybe Martin.
Yeah,
or
Matt. Great question. And
okay.
Then I guess I have an opinion. Martin has an opinion.
Great. I'd like to hear both of them.
We will for sure chip in and talk about it. So, employee experience is for sure a hot topic. I mean, you've just said it, right? And what we're seeing, and this is a really evolving topic as well. But for us here at ServiceNow, and that is actually, when I say here at ServiceNow, it reflects more or less what we're seeing and hearing in the market. It's a triangle of 3 different elements. So on one hand, it's engagement, right? It's the engagement of the employee in the organization, because we all know if there's an engaged employee, the outcome is a lot higher after all. Mm-hmm. So then there's the angle of productivity. And it doesn't go that way that you just reduce cost or so, but it comes more from that angle of, if we automate things, then eventually we also deliver a better experience to our employees. But I will talk about it and I will give you a tangible example on that. And the other one is the whole topic around workplace flexibility, right? So the analogy I like to use when I talk about experience and how the current generation, and let's say also, and that's another topic, right? We need to look at 2025, 2030. all the generation that's coming into the corporate world. So what we're seeing today is a bit the expectation in organizations, the consumer expectation. When we think of Amazon, the way we eat, when we do shopping online, usually what happens is, you get to one of the leading e-commerce websites such as Amazon. And what you do is you start looking for your job. First of all, on that page itself, it's already very relevant to you because Amazon more or less knows your shopping behavior, knows who you are, right? So based on, you have an intent, you start looking for that product, and you're identified after all. On the right-hand side, what you're seeing is a one-click buy button, right? And very often we just click on that button, and what happens in the back? More than hundreds of workflows are being triggered that eventually that parcel is being delivered to you within hopefully 24 hours, right? And let's say it doesn't work out. It's not being delivered within 24 hours. We as a consumer, we reach out to Amazon, the Amazon Service Center, and it's just a click away, right? And with this expectation, the consumer expectation, that's what employees are expecting today in organizations as well. So when we think of these automation of workflows that being triggered in the back, that's accumulating workflows into one singular experience from various systems. We could think of a complex journey such as onboarding, right? You touch on IT, HR, facilities. They all need to come together after all to deliver that seamless experience. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, if something goes wrong, there's always service around. And in case service can be automated, perfect. It reduces cost and increases productivity. And if not, the human being is also just a click away. And that's what we're seeing around engagement and productivity today. And then there's the whole other notion around workplace flexibility, right? I mean, coming out of the pandemic, we used to work just from home. We have seen there is a desire as well to meet and mingle, to be social. And that's what we're seeing and hearing in the market as well, right? That the workplace itself is more and more becoming a social place, and less of a productivity place, because studies show that you can be productive at home in a very similar way, right? But there is the need and desire to have the flexibility, right? And these three different angles, that's what we're seeing today around the topic of employee experience and the expectations. And these will change and evolve in 5 years, in 10 years, because much is happening.
Okay.
So Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, Mats, I of course completely agree with you. What I also see as a driver for employee experience is that all of our customers, all of the companies, they want to digitize processes, right? They want to, when it comes to their customers, they want to be digital. They want to be perceived to be easy to work with. And you can't achieve that if you are working with paper internally, when you have very slow processes, when you're not moving forward internally, and also if you're not recognizing the right talents to do new things and go into new opportunities, go into new initiatives. And therefore, companies have realized it's not just sufficient to modernize on the outside, to modernize external processes, but they also need to do the same internally. And that's a big driver for employee experience. And I think, as for many topics when it comes to digital, the whole pandemic, as Mats described it, was a huge driver. Suddenly, everybody was working at home, and suddenly companies who have not invested into self-services, who have not invested into those kind of digital services for their employees, they had a huge problem, and they needed a solution in a very fast way. And that, of course, created an extra demand. At the same time, you had all of those workforce shortages topics, right? Especially when people returned then to the office after the initial shock. Suddenly employees were gone in many areas, right? We all remember the struggles last year we had when we had to fly from an airport. Suddenly workers were missing everywhere, right? So the employee became much more valuable and much more appreciated, and therefore you needed systems to also understand, where is the employee, you were using tools like survey tools to understand what is the sentiment of your workforce, where might we have issues in the workforce, and that created that term employee experience. I really came across the term during the pandemic for the first time. To be honest, I think it was evolving slowly before, but during the pandemic it really became big, and that is also what I see in the market. Right, there are different vendors, and every vendor might define employee experience a little bit differently. Some people just refer to it when it comes to understanding the sentiment, as I described it, so the survey piece. Others see really the digital interface to it, but I think employee experience is really all of it, right? Mm-hmm. Giving the employee a great experience, and also understanding what the employee wants, developing the career, and often employees also part of it, right? And bringing all of the information together that an employee needs. As Matt said, there's a new generation coming into the workforce. It's not acceptable for that generation anymore to do things on paper, to send in Excel files via email, and so on and so on. So that is the trend I see.
Excellent.
Yeah, and sorry, Douglas, please.
Yeah, the days of sending faxes and this type of thing, filling out forms and then sending them by faxes are probably long gone, right?
Yeah, and I'd say another very critical point you said, Martin, is this personal experience, right? We're all so different, and we all employees after all, and what I might see as a great experience might be completely different for someone else, right? And I'd say that is also something that needs to be reflected and represented in when we look at people's strategies for 2025, 2030. We're all so different. It's so diverse, the entire corporate space now.
Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting to note the generational shift as well, right? I mean, these are people entering the workforce who are in their early 20s, and they're digital natives, right? They've grown up with mobile phones, and their expectations of what the company's going to be doing are probably very different than somebody my age. I'm 372 years old, and I can remember back when we had to send messages via carrier pigeon. But it is definitely interesting to see that development and also that expectation grow. I wanted to also ask, related to this, companies also seem to be competing with each other on how good their experience can be, right? I mean, there is a battle for talent, right? And this is this something that you're seeing as well in the companies that you're working with?
Yes, maybe I can give you one example on that, Douglas. So, we're talking a lot to customers, and what we've heard from customers in the last couple of months was as well the same what I said about the customer experience, right? That customers started to invest into the customer experience first, and then they realized it's not sufficient. They also need to invest into the people experience, employee experience. We've also seen something similar when it comes to recruiting, right? Companies started to invest into a great recruiting experience. So they have a very, very modern interface to the outside world, to candidates, to attract those candidates, as it's very important to get the top talent from the market. But what happened then? Candidates accepted that job. There was a great candidate experience. There was also a good, what we call employer branding. So the company to the outside looks really attractive. They're doing a lot of, branding outside in LinkedIn and other platforms. But then the first weeks in the job, they realized, they have to work a lot with Excel files that are sent via email, and that the processes are not digitized in the way they were expecting. And then that led to high attrition in the first couple of months from employees because of that. So again, I think you have to do both. You have to digitize on the outside, but you also have to digitize on the inside.
Really interesting. Now, you both work with ServiceNow. You work for ServiceNow. How did ServiceNow come to offer solutions around human resources or HR?
I also work with ServiceNow on a day-to-day basis. So.
Okay, so you're a user.
Yeah.
This is really a dog food type of situation.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a interesting story, I'd say, right? ServiceNow was founded in 2004 by Fred Luddy. And Fred Luddy had this vision back then to develop a platform in the cloud. But when you imagine 2004, nobody really talked about the cloud, nor having a kind of development platform or so sitting in the cloud. So eventually what happened is, he developed that platform. He had that vision, him and a couple of other people. But then he wanted to market it. And he faced the situation that the market didn't understand it, investors didn't understand it. And he himself had an IT service management background. So what he said is, I'll show you how this fantastic platform can, help you. And what he did with the team, and within 3 months, he basically developed an typical ITIL process on the platform, just to prove the point. You have this fantastic platform, and how quick you can turn it, you can use it and make something useful out of it. Mm-hmm. So then that was how basically IT service management was born, and the rest is history. Uh-huh. But then and that is the funny story. Customers, they understood very quickly it's a platform. And on the platform, you can do more than, what's given to you out of the box. You can kind of, do more with it. Mm-hmm. So customers started using IT service management for HR, right? They understood, obviously, it's tweaking certain standard processes to make them work for HR. So, and with that, the need arose that ServiceNow actually develops a standardized out-of-the-box offering for HR. Mm-hmm. That's how ServiceNow HR was born. And now we're looking back at many, many, many years of ServiceNow HR. And I'd say similar to the ITSM story, also ServiceNow HR in the HR space has been quite a successful story, to that point that, we could even say it was, I think last year or so, Josh Bersin said the new core HR is actually what used to be the core HR in the cloud, a couple of years ago, is now the experience platform. So the experience platform is the new core HR, and he sees ServiceNow HR being one of the leaders in that space. So, tremendous story. And my personal story to that is, I've been now riding this story this wave for the last almost 5 years, seeing lots of companies onboarding on that, and seeing the whole market being disrupted. It has been a pleasure for me and really good fun.
Excellent. Martin, is this coming from your perspective? Is this what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, and if you want, I can dive a little bit into my history, which
Sure.
makes me feel old a little bit. But
I'm 372 years old, so good. I'm probably the oldest guy in the room.
I'm not sure if I can argue with that, but yeah, I started actually my professional life at SAP, and that was in 2008. And at that point, I started in a team that was called User Productivity Services, which was exactly about that topic. How to make the user, it was called the user, not the employee at that time, the user productive. How can SAP basically deliver its backend application to a modern user interface, which was the SAP portal at that time. So I've been in that space for a very long time, and I've seen that evolution, right, from in an HR context, from employee self-services, manager self-services that were hugely complex from an IT perspective. You had to install something in the back end. You had to have some kind of middleware to transform the data between, that back-end system and that front-end system, which was your portal. So you had a lot of areas where it could break, a lot of areas of complexity, a lot of implications from a security point of view, and that slowly evolved. Then, right? There were more services being offered, and then the whole mobile wave was coming in with the introduction of the iPhone. Mm-hmm. So apps were suddenly modern, and some customers really struggled how to bring those data from highly secure data centers to the open internet in form of apps, right? So what happened actually is that new players emerged in the market, and that was the whole cloud story, right? So in the HCM space, that was really the cloud HCM systems that evolved, like Workday, like SAP SuccessFactors, like Oracle HCM, to name the three most famous ones. And they were born in the cloud, more or less, at least. And they had offers. They had offered mobile apps natively or in the browser. So customers thought, hey, now I have those self-service. It's a much easier architecture. It's easier to use. You don't have all of those security issues anymore. But in the end, customers realized, okay, this is great to have those, but it's not everything, right? It's just the HR process. Those systems are great in helping the HR process to become digital. But what we see, especially from a ServiceNow perspective, that our customers tell us, yes, but there's so much more related to that HR process, right? There's a lot of IT. If we think about the onboarding process, right? It's one thing to have the master data of the employee, to also present the most relevant trainings maybe to the employee, but you need to provision the IT accounts, you need to order a laptop for him, you need to add him to different teams, Slack channels, and so on and so on. There's so many things that are part of that onboarding process, and therefore customers realized we need an employee experience platform that is bigger than HR.
Excellent. It makes perfect sense. I mean, this is something that GuideVision has also worked quite a bit on. I mean, in addition to doing their sort of typical integration things, one of the tools that they've developed was actually, it came from that experience having to provision users with, for example, a laptop. So they made this tool called Parcel Go, and Parcel Go sends out the laptop. It integrates with shipping services, so it actually connects up the shipping part of that experience as well. But that's kind of a digression, I guess. But I wanted to go back to the platform for a second, to the Now platform, and you mentioned some other sort of competing platforms. But what are some of the benefits that ServiceNow can provide when we're talking about employee experience? What would some of those benefits be?
I'd say, we have discussed earlier about when you bring aggregate workflows and how and when you really sit as the platform of the platforms on top of different solutions and aggregate this into one singular experience, right? But I think what is when we, and that is also what I also already said in the beginning, when we discuss experience today, it doesn't necessarily come with just investing in one area, or with and not having cost savings. And I'd say that is very critical with the ServiceNow platform. What you can do with the ServiceNow platform, on one hand, you increase the experience, but on the other hand, you have the potential to reduce cost. And when you look at today's environment we're in, right? Change is for sure the new normal. Going into this year, inflation peaked. There all of a sudden we had a Ukraine war, and we all going through this all together. Global crises, and that's the new normal. Change. And with that, the need all of a sudden in organizations, and when we look at 1-2 years back, the biggest topic we discussed with organizations were, because we were in a huge growth phase, experience. We need to improve the experience. Now, from one day to another, this shifted to, yes, we need to improve the experience, but at the same time, we need to also look at our costs, right? And that is the unique offering, or one of the unique offerings of ServiceNow, that you can really do both. With the platform, you can automate workflows, which eventually leads to cost reduction. But, and that's, to quote a CIO as well, that I had a discussion with the other day, when you automate eventually workflows, and that even across different platforms, and with that, you deliver a quicker service to your employee, you're at the same time increasing the experience for the employee, right? So it goes really hand in hand. On one hand, and when I say, and this is again to come back to my Amazon example, this is what we're expecting today, right? We're going on Amazon, we're ordering something using the one-click buy button. With one click, it triggers these workflows, and we expect the delivery within 24 hours. And with the very same expectations, we as employees are now entering living our daily lives in the corporate world. And I'd say that is really the unique offering of ServiceNow, that we can make this happen.
Mm-hmm. What would some examples be of some of the tools that are available on the Now platform? Like how does this actually work? I mean, like what would some of, like, when you mentioned, that there are these, these ways that the platform can connect these things together, but as I understand it, there are individual models.
I'll give you an example, Douglas.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes it more tangible. So when you think, first of all, what is critical to understand is when we work on solutions and ship products, we really want to ensure that we meet the employee where he or she spends the time. Meaning, whether you access eventually ServiceNow through mobile, through desktop, or through a chatbot, or through Microsoft Teams, for instance, because it's entirely embedded, it's up to you, right? So when I take a tangible example and looking at this ServiceNow being the overarching platform, there is, in most of the HR setups, you have a document management solution in place. That's where documents are being generated, and most of the time documents are being archived. But in an ideal world, what happens if we have this one start shop, let's put it that way, which is in many organizations ServiceNow, the employee would go to this place, again, Teams, portal, desk, eventually the employee would be on that place. And then why not using the chatbot and just saying, I need an employment verification letter. And for some organizations, that's 30% of their HR use cases they're seeing, right? Because you needed to admit the kid to the kindergarten, you need to want to buy a house. In fact, it's a singular request, but what needs to happen is it needs to request that third-party solution where the document is being generated. So what's the expectation for the consumer, for the employee, is that this happens in the back, the document is being generated, and then eventually provided back to the employee through the virtual agent, through the chatbot, right? So all basically with one intent, the document is generated and provided back through automation. But again, in case the document is not enough, maybe there's something missing, you have the possibility to reach out to a human HR person who can support you again, right? That's just a very tangible example, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really helpful, actually. Yeah. So this is, I can see now how these processes can be, like you're saying with the one click purchasing, right? There's a single request, but it triggers a whole bunch of different approaches. This really does sound like a lot of what we're talking about when we mean hyper automation.
Or right? Yeah, exactly. Or when you think about an onboarding process journey, right? Right. It's, as Martin was saying earlier, there is when someone onboards, right? Onboarding starts with pre-boarding, and then there's the onboarding phase. Then there's day 30, day 60, day 90. The most critical tasks and most complex tasks of such a process actually happen prior to day one. You need to make sure that access rights are being provisioned for the employee, right? That he or she can access the systems on day one. There needs to be the process for ordering hardware, right? Yeah. At the same time, the person wants to start maybe doing learning. The engagement piece is very critical. So you're looking at different stakeholders, IT looking after provisioning hardware, HR, the whole engagement topic documents. Maybe there's legal involved, facilities, ensuring the workplace is ready, right? All these kind of stories. And in an ideal world, there's one workflow that sits on top of all of that and triggers automates the respective workflows and allows for this aggregated experience.
Fascinating. Now, I want to go back to the idea of the pandemic sort of bringing about rapid evolution in companies. Is this an area where ServiceNow has really, are they leading the market, or is this coming from the demand of the market themselves? I mean, with regard to hybrid work scenarios, for example, right? How is ServiceNow helping an employer and an employee?
Yeah, so when hybrid work, I think ServiceNow is helping there from multiple angles. One angle I think we discussed already quite a bit, to provide the information to the employee. So no matter where the employee is working from, he or she can find information around policies. If I want to, if I'm pregnant and I want to go on parental leave, maternity leave, what is the policy? How do I request that? We then also help with the digital request on that. And we also help with, giving a prompt response to the employee. So all of that, I think that is a very important part when it comes to hybrid work as well, right? In the old days, we were going to the HR office and we were asking those questions, or we were handing in the paper form, and that can't happen anymore in the days of hybrid work. That is the one aspect. The other aspect is really when it comes to workspace and how companies treat offices, treat workspace. We have seen a big evolution throughout the pandemic, right? First of all, everything was closed down and companies had to shift to remote work from one day to the other. But then the second phase started and companies reopened their offices, and still they wanted to ensure safety for their employees, and ServiceNow helped there. So we had the safe workplace apps, which allowed companies to, and that was implemented within days, really. So we have multiple customer stories who implemented those solutions within days and could then support that reopening of the office in a safe way. And we used it ourselves internally, right? When I went to the office in Munich, I registered the day before and I said, hey, I want to go to the office. Is there still space available? I could select my desk. And I was filling in a health survey. I did not have any symptoms of, a cold or flu and all of that. So we could ensure, first of all, pre-visiting the office, that I have a space. I know where I sit. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm healthy, and I know my colleagues are healthy. Mm-hmm. And then actually after the end of the office day, I was asked to fill in a contact trace. So who did I meet within the office? So who was with me in a room? So in case, I developed symptoms after I visited the office, colleagues could be informed that, hey, there might be a risk. You have met with this person. Or you have met with a person who is at risk. So all of that was the first phase. And that evolved over time, of course, right? Now we don't have those health surveys anymore, or only a little minority of companies does that anymore. Right. But what is becoming a big theme nowadays is coming back to the topic of cost saving as well. Mm-hmm. Because the return to the office happened, but not all of the employees returned to the office, right? If you look at the numbers, the number of remote employees is a lot higher than before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. That means, on the other hand, that companies don't need all of the space anymore. Some companies have grown throughout the pandemic and realized, hey, I would need additional space if I had to host all of my employees now. And they used workplace service delivery from ServiceNow to basically administrate the desks. So you had to register a desk or reserve a desk, and you could exactly see on a nice floor plan where that desk would be, who are you sitting next to. Also, when you're visiting a new office, you could see exactly the facilities. Even if you're disabled, and you could even see how you would get there in an accessible way. And other companies who realized, hey, I have way too much space because I might not have grown so much during the pandemic, and right. Now only maybe 70% of the people visit the office anymore, or maybe only 50%. They use what we call space optimization now from our workplace service delivery, where you could really optimize space, save rent, save cost on the office space, which is a huge driver, as you can imagine.
Makes perfect sense. Now, without naming names, because I know everybody is bound to different NDAs and things, can you guys provide some use cases about how this is working in the companies that you're seeing?
I can even give you a name because this is a public story on ServiceNow's website I'm referencing here, and that's actually a long-standing, long-lasting relationship customer. It's Coca-Cola European Partners, and I can't remember really when they onboarded on the ServiceNow HR journey, but it's a couple of years back, and recently they did a webinar on their journey with ServiceNow HR. And it was very interesting to listen to that because they started out very small, a pilot, a very disruptive way of kind of introducing ServiceNow HR to the workforce. But as there was value seen by the employees in having, a place where all services would come together and having this digital interaction with HR, all of a sudden the portal itself, the traction on it skyrocketed. And with that, there was huge momentum around ServiceNow HR at Coca-Cola European Partners. And in fact, some KPIs, what they have realized over the last, over a period of 3 years, they've saved 1 million hours of productivity. And that is a lot when you think of they having, roughly 23,000 employees. So that's a significant number just by, everything we have discussed before, automation, virtual agent, all these kind of things that saves a lot of time after all, delivered a greater experience, hence the huge traction on the portal. But at the same time, there's some significant cost savings for Coca-Cola European Partners. And on top of that, and that speaks to, Martin's story around, first of all, a story about the platform, and second of all, how quickly companies could adopt new apps. They also adopted, going into the pandemic, the Safe Workplace apps. And they rolled these out. I think it took them, after all, 2 weeks or so to roll them out. And then, with all the use cases included that Martin just mentioned, contact tracing, reserving a space, and so on and so forth. So I'd say it's a very interesting story, and it's published on the ServiceNow website. Another one, not to name a name, here in Switzerland, it's a bank, and when they were rolling out and looking at ServiceNow HR, they also said before rolling out ServiceNow HR, we really need to look at our processes. So they spend a lot of time on how do we do things today? How do we want things? How should they look tomorrow? And by doing so, and that's they've realized many processes could be cut by 50, 60, 70%. And through that, they reached a huge standardization after all, which is now in the ServiceNow HR represented HR product. So very standardized, lean processes that deliver fast service to the employees. And also, with that, once they have realized how good this process works, they also looked at a very complex process, the onboarding process. And again, as we discussed earlier, Douglas, right? Different departments involved. And I sometimes hear stories where just the internal alignment to bring these departments together, have them speak, takes months, right? After it took them not long, half a year or so, to bring onboarding live. So now on a daily basis, people are onboarded through ServiceNow onboarding. So that's just 2 stories that I can share from my experience here.
Excellent. Martin, from your perspective, I wanted to ask about some of the trends that you're seeing. What are you seeing, and what's coming in employee growth and development?
Yeah, so if we take the topic of employee experience and think about, where does it evolve to, where does it develop into, and I think the next logical step that we see is really the employee wants to see growth. They want to grow their career. And at the same time, organizations, they need to identify what are the skills that employees have within the organization. There are very few companies out there that do not need to transform because of all of the things that Mats mentioned before, right? New business models, new challenges in the markets. So every company needs to identify people with the right skill set in the company. At the same time, employees want to understand, what skills do I need to develop my career? What skills are crucial for that company? So what do I need to learn? And at the same time, managers try to understand, what skills are needed in the organization to create the best outcome for my team, to create the best business outcomes, right? So bringing all of those things together, we are working on something which we call employee growth and development. And it really is about skills intelligence. So we try to understand what are the skills that an employee brings, what are the skills that an employee wants or needs to develop, and what are the skills that an organization needs, and where do we need them? And bringing those things together is basically what we offer with employee growth and development, to connect skill needs on the one side and employees who have those skills or who want to develop those skills on the other side, and connecting learning systems to develop those skills with ServiceNow. So to have a learning experience platform to bring together the different learning systems a company might have today, to allow companies really to modernize themselves, go into new challenges, go into new business, adapt quickly. Just think about the automotive companies, right? They all need that rapid shift from, combustion engine to battery development to electric vehicles to self-driving, complete shift of the business model. And how that really what that means for transforming the workforce. And this is what we want to serve with ServiceNow, to be that connection layer in between all of their systems to serve that skills technology.
A true platform of platforms, right?
Right.
Yeah, and you could, there's different modules on the ServiceNow platform. There's a solution for resource planning, for project planning, project management as well, right? You could think of different use cases to use these skills once you have them in the ServiceNow platform, how you could also use them for these kind of topics, right?
Excellent. Man, there's so many things that I want to ask you guys about, but I know that we're running a little bit short on time. But I did want to thank you both for your time, and for really opening my eyes to the world of HR and of employee experience. I'd never really thought about it, but yeah, in my own experiences, it's been definitely really interesting to see how a company can become more agile by using these types of technologies. So Mats Nemelka and Martin Kraus, thank you so much for joining us today on the GuideVision Insider Podcast. Thank you, viewers and listeners, for actually joining us today. My name is Douglas Arianes. We do these podcasts on a regular basis, and stay tuned. We will be producing many more of these in the months to come. You can catch us on all of the major podcasting platforms. And we do have video versions of the podcast on both YouTube and on Spotify and on the GuideVision website. My name is Douglas Arianes, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.